Hey, Spencer.
Hey, Jody. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for joining.
Yeah.
Hi, Kim.
Kim, Kim, Spencer, Jody, can you hear us? A little bit.
Really quiet.
The volume up? Yeah.
Volume up.
I will move to the front.
Jody, can you talk to see how we can hear you?
Yeah, can you guys hear me? Can you hear me now?
No.
Yes.
All right. Cassie, do you want me to share my slides?
We're setting up, we're getting the tech going.
Okay, we'll be patient.
Oh, Jody, can you come now?
We hear a lot of background noise.
Okay. So we should probably mute.
Oh, that's better, Cassie. That's better.
Okay. And do you mind if we record them and share it with you too?
Nope, no, that's totally fine. Are you guys good with that? Kim? Spencer? Yeah. Sarah will be joining us too, I believe.
Okay. Well, do we want to get started with introductions from the three of you? Jody, we can start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everybody. I am Jody Robertson. I'm the proud principal here at McMicken.
And Spencer.
I'm gonna turn my video off because I'm at my in-laws' house and their internet sucks. So hopefully, let me know if I'm freezing or glitchy or whatever. I'm Spencer Flanagan. I'm the intermediate emotional behavioral classroom teacher at McMicken, and I've been here for 8 years.
Okay, Kim.
Hi, I'm Kim Fronberry. I am our admin intern as well as an ELL facilitator and an instructional coach at McMicken. But previously I was a classroom teacher here and did some co-teaching and work with our EBC teachers, Spencer and others.
Great. And so, Jody, thank you all for being here today. Jody, did you want to share your screen? Or should we-
Yes, I just need somebody to enable me.
Ryan went to check on the team upstairs, so where's his computer? Right there, we can.
Make Jody a host.
We can just do share multiple screens. Where it says participants. There you go. Yep.
The arrow by share screen.
Share screen.
Yep.
All these techniques and people, great.
Okay, we need you a co-host, Jody.
All right, here we go. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, so we're here to talk to you guys today about our inclusive scheduling and also some tier 1. We already did our introduction. Sarah Morgan, our LRC, our resource room teacher, will also be joining us hopefully a little bit later. We're right at dismissal, so things can get a little hairy, as you all know, at dismissal. And I just want to say that this is only some of the team. We do consider all of our educators inclusive educators. We just have a couple presenting today. So in our 30 minutes, we're going to talk about our inclusive journey, master scheduling, and then our tier 1, which is core instruction, morning meeting and cougar time, our PBIS structures, our DAP, which is our data analysis protocol, and then success groups. So you'll get to hear a little bit about all of that today. All right, since Sarah is not here yet, I'm going to share the inclusion journey, and then Spencer and Kim, if you guys want to, if I forget to mention something, feel free to pop off, okay? So as you can see on this slide, it's been 7, 8 years since we kind of started our official inclusion journey. When Alex Hodge, our principal, who's been here for 8 years, came on, that first year did what every new principal does. She just kind of observed and watched and collected a lot of data. And then in the 2015-16 year, she saw that there was a need for an intervention block where students were receiving small group instruction. That's also where she launched our data analysis protocol. And the intervention block had a twist to it, unlike other RTI. That's where our students with IEPs receive their specially designed instruction in reading, writing, and math. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. We also had it was teacher-led, but we had a couple of our teachers attend a co-teaching professional development, and that's where they really sparked an interest to try on the co-teaching model here at McMicken. And so the next school year, they started small. The 2 teachers, which is Naomi Fair, who's now at the University of Washington, the Herring Center. She was the gen ed teacher, and then Sarah Morgan, who's joining, she just said she's coming, was the LRC teacher, and they decided to co-teach in a 3rd, 4th grade split class for just literacy. And this is where we really did start our journey around the master schedule impacts, making sure that that co-teaching model could work. That's one of the things that they learned in the PD that they attended the previous year, was master schedule was the foundation of inclusion. And so that's where they worked with our former assistant principal to make sure that the master schedule would support the work. They found a lot of success in that co-teaching model. And so the next year we went from 1 class to 4 classes. And it wasn't just our special education teachers who were doing the co-teaching. That's where, actually, no, sorry, that was the next year. I'm getting ahead. So you can see we did co-teaching for across 3 different years. And then in the 2018-19 school year, we started looping in our instructional coaches and our multilingual learner facilitator. And that's where they would co-teach for certain parts of their day. So maybe in a math class or a 2nd grade writing class. And Spencer joined the co-teaching journey in the 17-18 year. Spencer, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Wait, Jody,
Sure.
can I interrupt for 1 minute really quick? I just want
Yep.
to kind of mention what Jody said when we were talking about the resource leveraging earlier. So what they did was all out of classroom staff had to commit to at least co-teaching 1 class, which means they had to co-plan with that team and then co-teach a class. So that's how they made sure they had enough resources. They also, so they could have had 2 general education teachers co-teaching a class, but because they co-planned and was overseen by the special education teacher, then they could provide those services in the class because there was that supervision. So that's what I'm talking about, maximizing those resources and leveraging those resources. So people say we don't have enough staff, but what they did at McMicken is they found really creative ways to use everyone. Okay, thanks. Sorry, go ahead, Spencer.
So I am a traditionally self-contained classroom, and in the 17-18 year, I decided to give it a try with some persuasion from Cassie, from my principal, and the kids that I had that year. It was like, I felt like this was a good opportunity to try it on. And I co-taught in 1 class. I partnered up with the gen ed teacher, and it was great. We had, I brought all 11 of my kids into 1 classroom. So we had 36 or 37 kids in a math class for 90 minutes. And it was a huge success. And so that kind of sparked this desire to, like, I want to do it again. I want to try more. And so each year I've tried on different things and added an extra co-teaching block or tried teaching with a different teacher, trying to increase the time that my students were accessing core instruction in the gen ed classroom. So a lot of successes for both students and also for me as a teacher. So that kind of was the starting point of my journey in this inclusion work and kind of building to then where I am now.
Yeah, so then obviously the 2019-20 school year, we opened an inclusive kindergarten program in the Highline School District. That model is 7 students with IEPs joining 11 peer models taught by a special education teacher who is both special education and general education teacher. So there's 1 teacher and 2 paras in there. LRC continued to co-teach. Our 4th and 5th grade EBC, Spencer continued to co-teach. And then this is where we looped in our primary EBC teacher, and that's where she started co-teaching in 1 3rd grade literacy classroom. That's also where we really started to think about the least restrictive environment for our students. And then the pandemic happened, as we all remember. And so the 2020-21 school year, we're distance learning until the spring. And then again, about 60% of our students stayed in distance learning. So they were there the whole year. And that's where really we were like, let's just put our students who are typically in our self-contained classrooms in the gen ed classroom all year. And I'm gonna have Spencer and Sarah share a little bit about that experience.
I can start, Sarah, and then you can jump in. So I mean, that when the pandemic happened and we were looking at classes and I was like, I don't want to teach 10 kids in my own Zoom across multiple grades. It's like behavior was the thing impeding prior their access to the gen ed class. And with that kind of barrier removed, we're like, it makes sense. Let's put them in the gen ed Zooms and then we'll provide additional support, scaffolds, whatever is needed, small group time. But they were there. And that, I think, was eye-opening for us, for myself and our team of like, this is where they should be, and it's my job to figure out what supports need to be put in place for them to access it. And so then going into this year, we were like, let's eliminate self-contained and just have kids be gen ed. And, you know, I think this was our first year that all the students with IEPs had seats in gen ed and counted as a full-time student in gen ed, which we've been fighting for years. And so that happened. And, you know, it's not perfect. And I've had to pull back here and there and teach some in my room and then push them back out when they're ready. And it's just this mix of kind of how we're delivering the services, but it's still that helps shift our mindset of like, these gen ed is where they need to be. I need to figure out how to get them there, how to support them there. Again, pull back for a little bit if need be, rearrange supports, but kind of where I've landed is my program is designed and my structures are designed to fit student need. And some students all have varying needs. And so their day is going to look different. And my supports and all the scheduling I'm going to talk about later is based on student need. Sarah, I don't know if you want to add anything
Great, yeah.
else.
Sorry I'm late. I was supporting a student. Yes, I think I'm the learning resource room teacher here at McMicken. So I think as you can kind of see from our journey from the kind of LRC side, as long as we were doing this alongside all the special education teachers, but is we really started with that co-teaching, and then, you know, we were like, this is really great for all students. How do we bring inclusion to all students? They're not just in co-teaching. So then over the years, you can kind of see like we ramped up co-teaching, and then we were like, oh, co-teaching isn't the only successful method for inclusion. So then we kind of tried other methods for inclusion. So we really have just been, it's a lot of trial and error is what I feel like this inclusion journey is really showing. And it also shows all the success we've also had with it and ramping up co-teaching. And as Spencer was just speaking about, I think we're really in that land of the flexible delivery services and model right now. So we are just looking at all students with special education across our entire school and what they need. And that's driving our schedules, our paras schedules. I mean, as everything should be, just it's student centered. And so we're doing that from all the back planning that goes behind the master schedule and all of that, which we'll go over. So I think this journey just really shows, like I said, you know, our trial and error, what worked, and then how we've adapted over the years.
And Jody and Sarah, but I had one more thing. There also was that there were students previously where McMicken was their neighborhood school, and they had been sent to other programs in the district, like their kind of what they call an ILC programs for students with like significant cognitive disabilities. And what McMicken started doing too is welcoming those students back, saying, this is your neighborhood school, come here, we'll figure out how to provide the supports and services that you need. Again, taking a very collaborative approach between the special educators there in the building.
Yeah, and along with that, we also got district support. That is the vision of our special education director here in our district. And so she's been a fierce advocate of the work that we're doing here for us. So lots of support there. It's not just us. All right. Okay, so now we're going to dive into the master schedule, because seriously, the inclusion work won't happen if the master schedule doesn't support it. And that's something that Sarah and Naomi learned many, many, many years ago. And we're still really refining and defining what needs to be in place for our master schedule. So just to give you a little bit of heads up, these are the things that I consider when we're building the master schedule. We have just under 500 students. Just under 45% of those students are multilingual learners. We have just under 16%, which is just under 80 students qualifying for special education services. 7.3% are receiving McKinney-Vento services. In our building, we have 2 LRC teachers and 2 EVC teachers. We also have an IK teacher that I talked about. We have 1 multilingual facilitator. We have paras that are allocated for our special education programs. Something that Alex, our principal, does. She's very, very resourceful when it comes to her budget. And if there's a need, she'll figure out a way to fix that need. And so, like I shared, our traditional IK program model is that there's 1 teacher and then 2 paras. And we really saw a need to have that classroom be co-taught. And so she combined the 2 IK para positions and funded a general education teacher with the support of the district. We also use our categorical funds to build up our para hours. So we do get student monitoring and bilingual paras from our district, and we use categorical monies to fulfill their schedule so that they can support our success group model. And then in many schools, specialists drive the master schedule, and that's been a big shift that we had to make many, many years ago, was now inclusion drives our master schedule. However, I still have to keep in mind our PE, music, and library teachers and what we're allocated there. So when I am developing the master schedule, here are some things that I like to keep in mind. And it really does start with student and staffing needs. We consider the academic and social needs for both instructional and non-instructional times. That includes, recesses and lunch. We, like Sarah said, we're starting to do more of a flexible delivery. So we now have a table, and we're even thinking about going back to the old sticky note where we literally sticky note every single student that needs SDI and start to figure out where they're best supported and service and get the service that they need. And then what else is unique about McMicken? Our 4th and 5th grades, 5th grade has been departmentalized for many years. This is the first year that we've successfully departmentalized 4th grade. And so that's also a consideration on our master schedule, making sure that they have those longer content blocks with a nice transition in the middle of their day. I also like to work smarter, not harder, and think about what were the strengths and weaknesses of previous master schedules. That way I'm not starting from scratch each year. So we look at instructional blocks, our success group blocks, look at the different transitions. And then most recently, the feedback I've gotten from our EBC teachers is because their students are now in many different classrooms across different grade bands, I have to really make sure that there are content blocks where that one special education teacher can provide literacy support to their students across multiple grade levels. So as I take in these considerations and I start to develop a schedule, I always start, and again, this is the shift that had to happen that even was before me with our previous administrator, Megan, is you have to start by looping in your inclusive educators first. We have to know what they need the schedule to be to make it happen. After I get approval or input from the inclusive educators, then I go to the grade level teams, and that's where we kind of determine the content blocks and to make sure that the schedule matches their students' needs. And then finally, I look at the specialist schedule. One thing that we like to consider is collaborative planning. When we talk about co-teaching and inclusion, a lot of it comes from that co-planning. And so we need to make sure that our teams or our teachers, both inclusive and gen ed, have common planning time so that they can be supporting each other. So here's an example of this year's master schedule. This is through about lunch, and I'll show you on the next slide the end of it. You can see that we have success groups, which we'll talk a little bit more later. Like every other school in the nation, at least in Washington State, we did have to have 6 lunches instead of 4 because of COVID. And so that was a whole nother layer to master scheduling this year. You can see how, again, 4th and 5th grade, they have those larger chunks. That's for their departmentalizing and then where they transition. Like I said, the feedback I got this year was that my primary EBC teacher, she has students in 3 different grade levels and they were doing different things. So that was a challenge for her. And so next year, as I'm building the schedule, literacy will happen, not exactly at the same time, but at least they'll be in the same content block. So like here, this should really be literacy and literacy. That way that teacher can push in and support or pull out if she needs to pull out and support. Again, depending on student needs. And then here's the end of the day. Couple things to pop out. We'll go back one more slide as we start our day. This is part of that tier 1 with morning meeting happening in every single classroom. And then we end our day with Cougar Time. And Cougar Time is a new addition this year. And again, we'll share a little bit more about that later. So that is our master's.
Anything you see? Does anyone have any questions about the master schedule? Yes.
What starts the beginning of the day that was up there?
Morning meeting.
Morning meeting.
And how long is that? 15 minutes?
It's 15 minutes, and in the book it talks about having 20 to 30 minutes. We're using responsive classroom, their structure, but we'll talk about how we had to shift that this year to fit in Cougar Time.
I have a
Yes.
question. When you're placing students for inclusion, so let's say you're placing students in 3rd grade and you have 4 3rd grades. How do you consider placing the students if they're all, for example, LC students? Do you place them across those 4 classes? Do you place them more heavily in one class? How do you think about doing that?
That's a great question, Sarah. Do you want to answer that question and how we've kind of shifted?
Yeah, I couldn't hear that super well. Do you?
Yeah. So she was asking, when we're thinking about inclusion and we're choosing students for inclusion, how do we place them? Let's say 3rd graders. Do we put them all in one classroom? Do we spread them out?
Yeah.
What are?
Great question. So when we do co-teaching, we build that class around student need based off of the first thing we look at is what grade has the highest number of IEPs. And then when we're in that grade, we look at what areas do they qualify in, and that kind of guides the class placement. So if we are co-teaching, we will build the classroom so around their areas they qualify in. So for example, if we have 6 kids that are going to be in our co-taught classroom and we know that they would benefit from that, but we have only 2 of them qualify in math, then we know that co-teaching in math is not going to be, you know, the biggest area of need. So co-teaching in reading and writing, say if 5 of them qualify in that, is what's best. And so then given that, okay, we're like, great, we want these 6 students in the co-teaching classroom, they're going to be in, say, Miss Smith's class, then we know the other students in that grade with IEPs will then be evenly kind of distributed amongst the other teachers. And then we also look at need, right? Like if there's a teacher need, kind of teaching style, or if a teacher has kind of really good expertise on running small groups for a particular area, anything like that. So I hope that answers your question, how we kind of distribute the kids into different classrooms.
Can I speak to that really quick? I know like at the start of this year, as far as the self-contained goes, we kind of took some advice and tried to spread kids out evenly amongst the classrooms like we would gen ed kids. And that did not work. And I did not have enough people and enough staff to manage that. And so we kind of pulled back. And currently we are, for my program and the students that I work with, we are kind of grouping them. Again, it's based on student need. I have 6 4th graders that I work with. One of them is able to be in a classroom without much support in the classroom. And then in the classroom that I provide push-in support, there are 5 of my students who are there. So they're kind of stacked that way, but, and that might not necessarily be the most inclusive way to do this, but it's reality. And we kind of learned in order for this to work and I have to group them together where I'm able to provide, enough support to manage and maintain the behavior in that setting.
Thank you.
Oh, and that's me again. So I'm just going to talk really quickly about how, from a self-contained lens, how I'm kind of scheduling. And this is my most recent schedule, my version 1001 probably of this year. So it was timely that Jody asked me to be here because I literally just had to redo this. Our primary EBC teacher is out for the rest of the year. So this is a good example of the flexible service delivery in that Sarah, Dina, the other LRC teacher, and we kind of took this teacher's caseload and we're like, hey, let's break it up, split it up, and divide and conquer to support the remainder of the year. So you'll notice on my new schedule, I have 4th and 5th grade, which is the 2 grade levels I support. And then on the right is a 2nd grade student that now my team and I are supporting. So I just had to redo all the schedule. So I meet with Jody to look at the master schedule, and then I start planning out what is my day going to look like for 4th and 5th grade. What could each of the general schedules look like before I then need to modify it for individual students. I keep all my kids for the morning and the afternoon, a 15-minute block for our goal group where we're checking in the morning, we're stating what our goal is, and then we reflect on the end of the day. So those are important to me to have the beginning and end of the day with all of my students. And then I have 2 30-minute earned choice blocks throughout in my room throughout the day. So I have to figure out where I'm fitting those into the master schedule, and then what content blocks the kids will be going into. So you'll see here, I have the entire day mapped out. For 4th grade, I basically just take what does the gen ed schedule look like from that master schedule, plug it in here for 4th and 5th grade, and then I build in where I need my choice times and my goal groups and all of those things. So that's the student schedule. And then once I get to know the students and figure out what students where they can be, and then I might go on and make individual schedules, because one student might not be able to be in that gen ed literacy block the whole time. So then he'll have an additional kind of separate schedule. This is my para schedule. So again, with the kind of absorption of the primary UBC program, I have 2 new paras that I'm working with. So this is my latest schedule for myself and 4 para educators. And again, it's really just looking at student need, where students are, who needs support where, what specialists need support for the kids that are in specialists. Some are able to be on their own. Some need check-ins. Where's the push paras who are pulling small groups? LRC and I are sharing some success groups. So those intervention blocks, like Sarah said, we're looking at all kids with IEPs. And I'm not, as an intermediate teacher, I'm not the best at phonics. Like I'd have to go dust off my books and my knowledge of how to teach phonics. And I have several kids who need that intervention and need that SDI, but Sarah's great at that. So some of my students have been able to slide into those success blocks times with her and Dina. And then I can do comprehension. So I take some of their kids who qualify for reading comprehension. So all of these are built in to this schedule. So it's really a pain. And again, you have a schedule just like Jody can attest. And then a week into school, you're like, cool, now I have to sit down and make another schedule because this isn't working. And I have to slide this person here. This person's not the best support for that student. So it's just again and again and again, looking at it and going back at it. But this is my latest one that will start tomorrow. And then on the next slide, I just have a picture of, then I made a small schedule for each of the paras. So they know exactly where they need to be, and then they memorize it and it's fine. And then on the right is just an example of a student schedule that was a little more individualized than just the general schedule that most of my students follow. I think that's everything that I wanted to say.
Okay, so as Jody mentioned earlier, we really believe and have the value at our school that all of our educators are inclusive educators. So it really comes from some strong core tier 1 instruction in the classroom. In order for these systems to work and for things to be in place, there needs to be that collaborative, strong, across the board expectation. So just a few things quickly to just touch on that we kind of focus on here at McMicken that kind of help with that core instruction. We have a huge emphasis and focus on teacher clarity from the visible learning work from John Hattie. We really make sure our teachers have clear learning targets and success criteria, rubrics, learning progressions, basically making sure our students are owning their own learning journey. They know where they are, they know where they're at, where they're going, how to get there, and where they go next. Recently, we've also been really pushing this learning pit, that idea that learning is a challenge and we have to overcome that challenge in order to do our best. And from that, we've also incorporated our Cougar habits, which are the collaborative, optimistic, understanding acronym that you see there. And those are just those promoting those cell habits that then support academics. We have a huge emphasis on collaborative unit planning. And so we really make sure that our teams are aligned in what they're doing, because then that supports our inclusion work as well, so that our EBC and LRC teachers are aware of what's going on at the grade level teams. And there's a really big emphasis in our unit planning on standards-based instruction and standards-based grading. And of course, we utilize our collaborative planning amongst our teams to share resources, share methods, use that as an opportunity to learn and grow from one another as well. And part of that core instruction, we are constantly seeking professional development opportunities, we really tap into our teachers as leaders. And so our teachers often lead our professional development and share their strategies in the classroom, what's working well for their students. And most recently, we've developed a Golden Nuggets structure, which is just a quick bite-sized 15-minute PD that's reactive or in response to what our teachers are asking for. So if there's like a tech tool or a thing that they need support with, we quickly highlight that. And it's just a quick and easy way to dip in some PD. Along with our core instruction, we also have some really strong tier 1 supports for social emotional learning. As Jody mentioned in the master schedule, we schedule in time at the beginning of the day for morning meeting and time at the end of the day for Cougar time. The morning meeting is from the responsive classroom. The book is there up on the screen. The morning meeting has a bunch of different components, but basically the purpose of it is to build classroom community so that when conflicts arise within the classroom, our students are aware that they're part of a community and they know how to resolve those conflicts appropriately. It just builds that classroom support. This is a school-wide structure, so K through 5 all participate in it. It's supposed to be about 30 minutes in the morning, but we have had to scale it back a little bit to be more like 15 to 20 minutes per class so that we could allow for Cougar time at the end of the day.
Yeah, so as you saw in Spencer's schedule for his students, there's earned choice time throughout the day. And as we thought about fully including our students who are typically in a self-contained classroom, Spencer was like, they need choice time. And so I'm like, well, thinking about it, I'm like, well, maybe everybody needs choice time, right? Instead of if a child isn't or a student isn't as engaged in writing as you know that they can be, maybe we have Cougar time at the end of the day. You engage in writing during writing time, or maybe you have to finish it during Cougar time. Or if there's a conflict at recess and we need to do some problem solving or conflict resolution, then maybe we, instead of doing it at the next recess, because kids need to get out and move and teachers need that chance to catch their breath and go to the bathroom, maybe we have Cougar time as a time where they can do that. And if everybody's having a super successful day, then you just get the Cougar time. And so that's where it really came from Spencer and his wanting to push his students out of that self-contained classroom and into Gen Ed and trying to find the structure that he knows works well for his students. And I'm like, well, if it works for your students, it should work for all of our students. And let's just make it a tier 1 thing that all students get. We did learn quickly at the beginning of the year that the 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the day was not enough for students on Spencer's caseload. And so he did have to make some adjustments to his schedule to give them more frequent and longer times, longer earned choice times, but it is working for many of our students having that 10 to 15 minutes at the end of each day. We also used our PBIS budget to buy engaging activities, Jenga, games, Legos in primary, just lots of different opportunities for kids. And what's really interesting is teachers are actually finding that they're able to holistically really teach into or re-engage students with some of the cell instruction that they're doing in other parts of their day during that morning meeting time. It's a great time for students to really apply the cell skills that they're learning in other parts of their day. We also have really strong PBIS expectations. McMicken Cougars are safe, responsible, and they're the Cougar. That goes back to that, our Cougar learning habits. We do classroom Cougar tickets and then individual Cougar tickets. There's a weekly focus and students drive to meet that weekly focus, and then each classroom gets to choose an all-star Cougar. Every classroom has a pause center. This is a break place where kids, if they need to, if they're feeling unregulated, or they can go and take a break. Sometimes it's teacher prompted, sometimes it's student prompted. And so these are just the school-wide supports that are in place for all of our students to promote, really positive interactions and behavior, both in the classroom and out of the classroom.
Yeah, and that's really supportive for when our students who are coming in and out of different classrooms, going to different spaces. As they travel between the spaces, they see some of those common language and terms and structures, which is great. So quickly to highlight our data analysis protocol, this is something that supports us with our success group structure, which Jody's going to talk about in just a moment. Our data analysis protocol, or as we call it, DAP, are 6-week data cycles. And you alternate between analyzing formative data and summative data. So we have some district-wide tools and resources we use that are like diagnostic assessments that we have multiple times throughout the year. And then we also have formative assessments like unit planning, exit tickets, data that we're collecting from our students constantly in real time. Sorry, my phone is ringing. 1 second. Okay. And then we also, between the two of them, sometimes we use proficient. We focus on proficiency standards or proficiency data. And then sometimes we look at growth analysis as well too. So if we have a diagnostic in the fall, we'll then look at in the winter, in our winter DAP cycle, we'll look at how much they've grown since the fall. We complete them together in our grade level PLCs. And so we work together with grade level teams to analyze the data. And then it really helps us have this like shared responsibility and ownership of all of our students. And so our grade levels are working together. It's not just individuals one-on-one analyzing their data. It's really, let's look at all the 3rd graders. How did they do on their unit assessment? Let's look at all of our 2nd graders. How are they progressing on their standards? And then we use that information to help inform our success groups and our small groups. And it also helps us with our MTSS process as well, and identifying students that are not making as much growth, and what we can do to beef up their intervention. So the process kind of looks like we start by having PLCs enter their data. We then have them analyze their data and they focus on successes, areas for improvement, and then they use that to identify a 6-week plan up until our next DAP. Okay, over the next 6 weeks until we analyze this data again, what's the plan in place? Who's going to meet with who? What's their intervention? What paraeducator is going to work with them? What teacher is going to work with them? What materials are required? And that's that success group that's built into the master schedule, which Jody will speak to in just a moment. I'll quickly on the next slide just show you a template for our DAP of what that kind of looks like. On the left, this is an example of a growth analysis. So we would, from the fall to the winter, we would plot students in here based on high growth, high proficiency, low growth, low proficiency, and so on, which kind of pulls out those students who are making growth. And then of course, really intervening and focusing on those students who are at low growth and low proficiency. So then in that step 2, in the kind of box with the more pastel colors at the top, that's where we look for those successes, like, wow, look at all these students who made growth. And then where are those areas of improvement needed? And who are those students that are really sticking out to us that we might want to put on our radar for supporting through some coaching or MTSS cycles. And then at the bottom, this is just an example of then how it turns into success groups. So you have all that data, you have all those students, then you create some small groups. Who are the students in the group? What are they doing in that group? How often will they be meeting? What will they be doing? When are they meeting? Who are they meeting with? That sort of thing. So there's that accountability for our students really getting what they need. And this is a school-wide structure for all of our students, including our students with individualized education plans.
Okay, and then based off all that DAP information, we have our success groups. So as Jody talked about earlier on the master's schedule, each grade has 2 success groups throughout the day, one for reading, writing, and one for math. So there's 30 minutes for literacy, 30 minutes of math. Students receive their SDI, so if they're specially designed instruction, if they have an IEP during these success group times, so they are never pulled from core instruction. We don't ever want them to be missing instruction. That's a big part of inclusion. All students receiving enrichment or intervention. So all students at this time in the grade level that it's happening at the time is getting what they need. So whether that's enrichment, intervention, which can look like various different things. So for example, paraeducators could be supporting students that are at or above grade level. with both academic and English language development. And then teachers are pulling small groups in their classroom. Dina, Spencer, and I, so special education teachers, are pulling groups at that time. And students are also on our online program, iReady, where they're also getting instruction that is at their level. So success groups is just a time where students get what they need and kind of filling in those little holes for what they need individually.
And Sarah, just to add to that, one of the things that all of you prioritize at McMicken is that for students that are below benchmark, it's always the certificated teacher that's providing that intervention, correct?
Correct. So yeah, the paraeducators are for the students that are at or above grade level. So a lot of times they're doing the enrichment groups.
Thank you.
All right, so that really is all about our inclusive scheduling and then our tier 1, both academic, behavioral, and social. Are there any other questions you guys have for us? And if you don't have questions, we put our information here. We're always willing to answer individual questions. Feel free to email us.
Good question, Cassie. So how do your ESA staff, so SLP, OTPT, psychologists, do they work in these success groups as well?
That's a great question. So they really try to work with them in them, especially if a student does not qualify in a specific area. So for example, if a student only qualifies in math, then the literacy success group time is a great time to pull them for their services, as they won't be missing core. But that doesn't always is not the case. As you know, a lot of students with IEPs qualify in both all academic areas. So they would be getting small group during both of the intervention success group blocks. And so we actually work closely with them to find times where they are not missing core. So they would be either pulled out during the independent time or during the success groups. So whichever works. And like I said, we work on it together as a special education team to really make sure that students are not pulled from core instruction.
Yes, please. Thinking about student service minutes in special education, is it fairly understood that there are 30 minutes or 150 minutes a week for particular content areas? Is that just as a noted understanding within your building as looking at to make it fit within the success blocks? And so just trying to navigate that structure.
Yeah, again, great question. So most of our students kind of that prescription, right, is the 30 minutes for literacy and 30 minutes for math. We obviously have students, especially as we're doing a lot of inclusion, we have students that need much more than that. So we have some students where we're also pushing in during their independent work time, or during we have a couple kids this year where we're pushing in during when the instruction is being delivered to them. We have paras in there who are helping those students access that instruction. So not all students, not all their IEPs will say that they only have 30 minutes for reading and only 30 minutes for math. So, but that's kind of like that general prescription that a lot of our students, those have worked for them to just have those 30 minutes for literacy and 30 minutes for math. But it's not for all of our students. Some students have much more time in their IEPs. And then it wasn't on our master schedule, but on Fridays, as Jody mentioned, the success groups only run Monday through Thursday. So on Fridays is when we as LRC teachers pull our social, adaptive, and all those other things we need to fit in the week as well.
And also
I can add on.
Spencer, just quickly say also one of the benefits of the co-planning is that students can receive those SDI minutes because the special education teachers are co-planning with the gen ed teachers. It actually means that students potentially could be receiving SDI more than those 30 minutes because they're co-planning together. They know what they're learning, they know what those goals are in that special design instruction. As part of that co-planning process, those scaffold supports and some of that special design instruction can also be integrated within those gen ed minutes and into the gen ed teacher delivery. Spencer, go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to, what Sarah said about a lot of the students that I, again, with the master scheduling and inclusion, it's never perfect and fit. So my fourth graders, my earned choice block is during the fourth grade success block time this year. And so my fourth graders who qualify for academic services don't have that 30-minute block because we kind of look at it as like a social emotional success group, that choice time. So usually when I'm writing the IEP for those students, I'm writing their minutes as the push-in support that I'm providing during reading and writing or math, and then try my best to write goals related to the content that's being taught in the class. So that's our way of providing those services in the classroom, since I don't have that 30-minute small group time due to the need for the earned choice block and the master.
I did want to mention, McMicken is one of our Washington State demonstration sites, and they were actually the inspiration behind the demonstration sites project. So they were a demonstration site before the whole demonstration sites thing got started. And I really do encourage all of you, although it's lovely to listen to all of you talk, you tell the story really well. Going to see McMicken in person is a real treat. So being able to go see the quality of their instruction, I call their tier 1 the McMicken way. Going to see the McMicken way is a really, it's really powerful. So I encourage you, if you find the opportunity, to really go visit McMicken as one of our Washington State demonstration sites. And that's something that we can help coordinate for you. So any other questions for our team from McMicken? And thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, everyone, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you guys are so welcome, and just know that we don't have this all figured out. Like I said, we're still trying to figure out the kinks and make it work. And I think the biggest learning that we've had this year is there isn't going to be one size fits all in inclusion. Like every year is going to be different, and because we're bringing the services to the student, not the student to the services. So we just have to kind of think outside the box in any given moment.
Inclusion is a journey, not a destination.
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you guys. We're gonna log off and hop over to our staff meeting. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Bye.